today we're looking at 1974 Italian-Spanish co-production, The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. We're looking at this film for a myriad of reasons. One of them being this is one of the only horror films that I know of that's set in Manchester in England. We're of course from Manchester ourselves, being the Manchester Morgue
Coronation
podcast.
Street.
No connection, not much anyway. And we're going to be slicing and dicing this film up tonight with a little look later on at Halloween 3, as it's nearly that time of year. So, now guys, I know this is a film I've seen a few times before. I saw it last week and I hadn't seen it for a long time before that. Is this a first watch for either of you, Lee?
It is for me, yeah. I remember you telling me about this film. It must have been like 15 years ago, maybe. And I was always really interested in this zombie film set in Manchester. But it's it was probably before the days of streaming, before you could easily get hold of this film on DVD.
Right.
And obviously, recently it's just been released, hasn't it? The definitive edition. Synapse release. So,
yeah, there's a really good Synapse. Synapse are an American company, and they've just recently put out a very nice edition of this with books and booklets and posters and CD soundtrack. And there's a ton of extras on the disc, which I haven't worked through yet, but I've watched the film, and yeah, it's a nice little release for anyone who's interested. I'd certainly recommend it.
And it was so good we named the podcast after it.
Exactly. What we're going to call our podcast, but the Manchester Morgue podcast. And Rob, was it a first watch for you?
No, it was a second watch. I remember Carl suggested it to a good friend of ours called Jamie. And Jamie, if you're listening, it's a shout out for you. So, and okay. Jamie's not a big horror film fan, but I think he sat me down in his house and he had it on something. I don't know if VHS or something. Maybe got it off you, Carl. And we sat down.
I did send it down to him once. Just for him to kind of have a look at, because one thing he is interested in is kind of films that show Manchester.
Yeah, he adores Manchester.
That box.
We saw it with it was one of those post club toast and tea things at 2 a.m. So I saw it recently, obviously for the podcast about a few days ago, and it's a very different experience, with a few more years under the bonnet as well. So
and being sober
helped, yeah. So I've got a very different take on it today.
You get several, depending on what you've had, you can get 2 or 3 different movie experiences from the same film, can't you?
Exactly, yeah, completely, yeah.
And it's pretty rare to have a zombie film set in England, never mind the Northwest, isn't it, really? I think that's why it stood out to me, really.
The only other one I can think of is there's a Hammer horror from the mid-60s called, is it something like Plague of the Zombies, which is England set, but it's not kind of in the style of Night of the Living Dead, which this film is. I suppose
you could mention the American Werewolf in London, starts off in Yorkshire, which gets, as close as, sorry, Lancastrians, I'm a Lancastrian, that's as close as we get. But that's, but again, that's like big, it's completely different. I mean, it's basically set in London, that film, like most films of the 80s did. Yeah. But
now, guys, this film has a ton of titles. It's odd that Living Dead at Manchester Morgue has kind of survived as the best. I think it is the best title. But this is not what the filmmakers originally envisioned. We have other titles, as we discussed before, which are the nonsensical "Don't Open the Window." What was the other one? Lee, the one
that Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. I think there was even Zombie 3. I think was even one as well. It's got about 11 different names. This one, yeah.
I have heard of that one before. Yeah, that must have been like a video retitling at some point. What else was it? The Italian title translates as "Where Do You Come From?", which is another strange title, and I think the Spanish title is "Don't Disturb the Sleep of the Dead," which is not too bad. But it goes through a lot of titles. I think even on video when it was released years ago, this was just called "The Living Dead," and I think it might have fallen foul of
Copyright. Yeah.
the Video Recordings Act in the 1980s. I think copies of this were seized as it was, one of the many films was perceived to be a bit of a video nasty. So it's got a very interesting history, as well as being quite a good horror film in its own right. Well, I think it's quite a good horror film in its own right.
It was on the video nasty list, wasn't it, for a few years? Was it till 85, I think, or something? Then it was removed.
They started to re-release those films kind of towards the end of the 80s and early 90s and cut form.
Highly cut versions, yeah,
that's right.
And I think 2002 it came out on DVD.
That's right. And that was a pretty good release from on Anchor Bay. I think it's long out of print now, that one, but you can pick that one up for a few quid on various websites.
It's considered
that one.
I know it's considered a great stepping stone, isn't it, to take you from the beginning folklore, I suppose, of the zombie films. The great zombie films of the 70s and 80s. It takes you. It's like the bridge between the two. It's before like the whole
Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, the whole idea of the rules have not been set as well. So there's a totally different approach to zombies and the way they move and the way they're quiet because of the zombie. The dead in this film.
I guess we'll come to that later on. But something happens a bit later on. We think, oh, hang on, these are not like the usual zombies.
It's not like The Walking Dead where everyone's just pitchforking everyone in the head, and after 5 minutes, there's a lot more to them.
Bit trickier than that. So, guys, we're all Mancunians. We're all from Manchester, and the first 5 or so minutes of this film is all footage set. It's like a montage sequence set in Manchester as our protagonist rides through the city centre on his motorbike. I love the sequence because it's scored very, very well. This little bit, it's nice, funky kind of track.
That track's amazing, isn't it?
The orange double-decker GM buses.
It's beautiful. I mean, for me it's beautiful, but for most people just look at an industrial hell. But for me, when I see some of the shots in Manchester, even obviously I remember Manchester of the 80s as a kid, but it's so nostalgic, and even though it's before I was born and things, it's just,
nice. I have to say, I had the pause button out at some points of this, trying to figure out where certain things were, and I think they must have got around the city quite a bit.
There was scenes of the corn exchange, wasn't there? Before, obviously, it was blown up by the IRA bomb, but that was where the Hertz rental centre was. That was the corn exchange,
right?
And then there was the Manchester Central Station, which has been demolished, and that's where the GMX is now.
Yeah, lots of history there. One thing I noticed was this film's remarkably prescient, because in the opening scenes, and this is a prelude to what happens later, there's lots of people. It shows people wearing masks in the city centre, which I must say,
it's COVID secure.
I've never seen in Manchester ever. Probably not even today either. There's masks.
We like to breathe in our car fumes, don't we?
We do. Shots of car fumes and smoking factories, and
it's what gives us our dour personality.
You see the guy coming out of the bridge. Is it the Bridge Pharmacy? And he just comes out and pops a couple of pills, and then walks off.
Yeah,
anti-pollution pills.
It's the vacant faces travelling on the GM buses as well, and it's beautiful.
And as we were saying, they are real faces. They didn't put actors on the buses to get these shots. They just went out guerrilla style, and they filmed people on buses. I wonder if these people ever saw themselves randomly watching this film years later, thinking, "Hang on a minute, that's me." They credits.
What was that bit where they had Kenny Dalglish stood outside Manchester Cathedral in a Mac, and then suddenly the Mac comes off, and it's Kenny Dalglish has got 2 big breasts, and he's streaking across the road.
Yeah. For anyone watching this film,
I don't think it's our Kenny, to be honest.
For anyone watching this film,
but he's not that good.
It's become infamous, the film, for that opening sequence of a naked woman running across the street in Manchester, and she's very much of the time, isn't she? She's very much
physically,
70s lady. Yeah, physically.
In terms of her grooming,
her grooming's quite minimal. Yeah.
She needs a bit of ladyscaping.
Yeah.
But But I mean, again, it's a film with a brain, isn't it? You know, when that happens, it's and the fact is that nobody reacts to this happening in a busy city centre is making a statement, which we'll talk about later. There's lots of statements made all the way through this film.
And as soon as you spot that kind of thing, you're like, hang on, we might be on something here. This film might not be too bad.
It's not a ficky horror film.
First few times. What else did I see? So in the opening sequences, there's special effects by a chap called Gianetto Di Rossi, which is a good name, Rossi, because he later on went to do the gory special effects for zombie flesh eaters.
Oh, that's a classic.
So I wonder if the director of that saw this, and obviously there's some gory sequences later, and must have thought, we'll have it.
So it's like a CV.
Yeah,
it's like
The music's pretty good. I don't know him, but it's a guy called Giulio Sorgini. I don't know what other films he's done, to be honest, but the soundtrack for this film's pretty good. I think it's pretty effective.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it out there. You know, it was going to come clear later. I'm not a big fan of the film, but I have to admit the soundtrack gets you.
It's pretty ace, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty good, and I'm not. You know, I'll explain later why I'm not a fan, but maybe I'm just indulged now. But
we'll turn you around. We'll turn you around, Rob.
The more I hear the love in your voice, Rob, for this film. You can't say I think you're protesting too much.
No, I can appreciate it, but it's like, you know, I can appreciate, you know, I can appreciate many things, but I don't have to like them.
So anyway, our hero is a chap called George. The character's called George, and he's played by an Italian actor called Ray Lovelock, which is a great name. And
you've got to be careful saying that name, haven't you?
He was in loads of Italian exploitation films of the 70s, and a few Hollywood films here and there, in bit parts. And I think the Italian producers liked him because he had such an anglicised name that they could put on film posters and make people think, oh, it's not an Italian or a Spanish film. It's actually a...
Can we mention his? I mean, the voice, the dubbing. You know, like I know that we have to get past the dubbing, but the protagonist's main dub is like very camp, isn't it? It's that angry camp all the way through it.
Yeah, it's almost something from a Carry On film. His dub. I mean, I've heard him speak. He does not talk like that. He's got he speaks.
No. Don't bag me about.
Yeah.
If Charles Hawtrey had played it.
The other thing is, why has he got a Cockney accent? Because he's got an antique shop in Manchester that he takes his antique.
Oh no, there's a zombie.
Yeah, because there are some.
He does look cool as fuck, though, doesn't he?
He does look cool.
With his shades, with the side shields on there and stuff.
You can tell he's not a man.
What's that phrase you use, Lee, for Ray Lovelock as George? A certain kind of energy.
What type of?
Yeah, he's got big dick energy.
Big dick energy. That's exactly the description of Ray Lovelock.
That's going to be on a podcast clip.
He knows he's the star of this film. He gives it all his worth.
Here's a clip from the Manchester Morgue talking about big dick energy. Yeah.
Big dick energy, yeah.
So that's our Ray. Anyway, Ray leaves his antique shop that he runs in the middle of Manchester, we presume, and he takes a precious artifact from it, pops it in his bag, closes the shop up, hops on his bike, his motorbike, and heads out of Manchester city centre in that little montage scene to the greenery of the Peak District.
I was saddened when he left Manchester, because I wanted the whole film to be set in the Arndale Centre or something. But
no,
it was a shame, wasn't it, that we never returned? Yeah.
Well, even the big Hollywood films promise that kind of action. They don't deliver. Like, do you remember Friday the 13th Part 8, which was subtitled "Jason Takes Manhattan"?
Yeah, did he take Manhattan?
He did not take Manhattan. He reached Manhattan in the last 5 minutes, and then got killed. So
that's not a run sale, is it? That's not trade descriptions out moment. We have to.
You've got to be disappointed with Jason Takes Manhattan, which is mostly set on a boat. But they one for you to check out if you've not seen.
I've seen it. I've seen them all. But, so George heads out to the Lake District. He's going to Windermere, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, he needs to refuel, doesn't he? Yeah. And this is where we meet Edna for the first time, who's just getting used to driving a Mini. I think she must have just picked it up because she sets off in reverse and runs over George's Norton motorbike.
This is
He's
where
not too happy about.
Lee mentioned earlier about that George has got big dick energy. Well, the actor has, but this is where, like me, I lost. I know. I was talking about cowardice, like the lead '70s act characters often are bits of bit arseholes, aren't they? He's immediately real. Fair enough, his bike's been bashed into, but the way he speaks to her and his opening addresses to, he's such an arsehole.
This may be a trait.
It's called toxic masculinity, really. Is it? It's not very 2020, is it, really? But I think all the women love a bad boy, so I think Edna's got wet knickers secretly. I think she quite likes it.
I think she's intrigued. She's intrigued because
I'd like to think she has, yes.
I mean, what is his line? He literally says to her, "You can get me a lift." And she goes, "Well, I'm only going to the outskirts of Windermere."
Are you going to Windermere?
Not into the town exactly. Nearby.
Well, you'll take me there just the same, won't you? I'll drive.
Because she speaks very posh, like clipped RP voice. And then he goes, "Well, you can give me a lift to the centre. It's the least you can do." And it's and she just agrees. She just takes him in a car, just him and her on their own, a complete stranger with his rapey beard.
Even nicks a cigarette as well, just for good measure.
Yeah, he drives. He like pushes around the driver's seat.
Oh yeah. Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine doing that in 2020? You just say, "Move along, move out of the way, love. I'm driving your car."
He says, we don't want to bloody drive there in reverse, do we now, darling?
It's funny though, because the guy at the garage, the petrol station attendant, they dub on like a really good northern accent for him. So I don't know where they got that accent from. Because it was normal people who dubbed these films.
Why does George sound like a camp George a campo? But
why did they have to send off to Glasgow for tyres? Is that the only tyre? Was this like communist Britain where there's only one tyre factory in the whole of Britain or something?
How long will it take?
Well, you'll need a new wheel. We'll have to get that from Glasgow. And it's the weekend. Earliest will be Monday evening.
Maybe, this could be set in the future, looking down at Manchester Morgue. This could be Brexit Britain, couldn't it? Where we have to send to Glasgow for a tyre, replacement tyre. It's on the cards.
So they head off to the beautiful Lake District, but they're in fact, the film was filmed mostly in Derbyshire, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
In the Peak District.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, in the Peak District. So they pretend to be heading to the Lake District, just for us. But I suppose, non-English, non-Anglophiles would have no idea, would they? You just see English rural countryside, I suppose.
Anyway, so for unspecified reasons, they end up going to see, on the way to see Edna's sister for, at the moment, unspecified reasons.
She's brilliant.
And on the way, the road that they're driving on suddenly kind of comes to an end by the side of a large stream. So George goes looking for assistance because they're neither of them kind of know where they're going. So he goes looking for someone to help out, and he takes the car keys with him, doesn't he? Because he doesn't trust Ed to just drive off by herself. Yeah. And quite frankly, at this moment, I think if I were Ed, I probably would. So I
would have legged it by now. I would have legged it.
She makes.
I would have legged it. I would have legged it and pressed my rape alarm and be
I don't know. George is looking pretty cute. You might hedge your bets a bit now.
I think George is all right. I think he kind of proves himself later on, and considering what eventually happens, I think he's probably right to be kind of angry with her early on.
He's probably. Well, he pretends to be intelligent and that he's got a plan all the way through. He has no plan. He's very limited. But yeah, no.
So anyway, he goes looking around. Anyway, he finds what seems to be like a farmhouse and like a local landowner or farmer perhaps. Yeah. And he's using this brand spanking new machine, isn't he? Which is explained is using ultrasonic radiation, which is
an exposition machine
to kill the insects,
to eliminate pests and parasites from the land.
I think I was trying to watch when I was watching that bit, explaining about this machine to kill pests and stuff, and it sends out a signal and stuff. And I was trying to take myself out of it and say, imagine you've not seen 8,000 zombie films. And you're still quite innocent to the fact is that this signal will not raise the dead. Just go with it. But it's really impossible, isn't it? I've seen so many like radiation clouds and.
I wonder if the other titles, which don't mention zombies or living dead, I wonder if they would like deliberately trying to play down the zombie angle, because I suppose they're never really mentioned as zombies in the films, or as like.
Well, no, I mean, this is one of the other. I mentioned earlier about it's got good messages of food. It has lots to say, and this is like the big eco message, isn't it? About messing with the environment. That's a big thing. It's. I read a review earlier where it said they're quite heavy-handed with that, but I don't think they are actually. I don't.
I think if anything now, it's probably even more. It's more of a message now probably than it probably was back in '74. So I think it's quite kind of far-sighted, really, in that regard.
And this was actually something that they were doing at the time and still do today. They do send like food through radiation to kill pests and stuff like that. So it is actually based. I think the director said he wanted to base it in some kind of reality rather than just have a fantastical machine that created the zombies. He wanted to ground it in something that people could think was real, but it is a bit of a stretch. So I agree, Rob.
I like it. I think it works. I think it's a good angle, and it's a different way. It's a different way for the dead to be raised. I mean, if you watch all the all the other zombie films, there's lots of different ways, but it's
usually a virus, isn't it? Yeah,
a virus or a radiation cloud which settles over a graveyard.
Yes. So he's off doing that, and I think here's where you can see that the filmmakers must have been told, right, we need a knockoff of Night of the Living Dead, because Night of the Living Dead was probably hitting quite well around 69, 70. So I'm guessing by the time it got to the continent, 71, 72, that's when the filmmakers there would have probably thought, right, we need to do our own version of this that we can sell abroad. So here's the first time I noticed it's like Night of the Living Dead, because
what a colour version of Night of the Living Dead.
Yes, there was a colour version of it later on, but I'll perhaps we'll talk about that some other time.
How many minutes in is it before we get our first zombie shot? It's quite a long time, isn't it?
It's because this is what happens while George is finding out about the machine. Edna's back in the car, and this is where the kind of strange noises and sound effects start to appear in the soundtrack that kind of meant to unnerve you and discombobulate.
Yeah, it's kind of like an underwater sound, isn't it? It's kind of like bubbling underwater.
Yeah, that's right.
And then meet Guthrie for the first time, don't we?
Fart in the bath.
So the opening of Night of the Living Dead, the Romero film, is very much like this, because it's almost like there's like an unexpected attack. This kind of shuffling figure comes towards the and starts attacking her from nowhere. And of course,
he's also quite well dressed, isn't he? As well,
he is.
He's not wearing like a ragtag. He's been buried for months and months. He's quite well dressed, a bit damp, but
has he been buried? We'll talk about this plot development later. But has he been buried? Because don't they find something of his later? Should be in that he's not.
I've never seen this film, but apparently he's the spit for the Joy of Sex man from the 70s. So every time he came lumbering
as well, I've heard that rumor. I can't.
There was a lot of moaning and groaning.
Yeah,
anyway,
I wasn't looking below the waist.
This is where Joy of Sex guy comes along, and I don't think Edna's aware at first of the kind of danger that is posed to her as he kind of shuffles up to her and starts to
hello, what's wrong?
And he puts his hand through the window. Maybe that's why it's called "Don't Open the Window." He puts his hand through the window on the Mini.
Can I mention that Edna's really hot as well? But she, there was a casting trend, wasn't there, for casting beautiful redheads?
Do you remember? We were talking before about our friend Jay? Yeah. One of the things he said to me after I'd lent him the film years ago was, that lead actress in the film, for something to that effect.
We are back into Carry On territory again, aren't we?
Christina Galbo.
Christine Galbo, yeah, lovely. Yeah, and she's in another film I've seen. I think it's called What Have You Done to Solange? And it's another Italian horror film. But to be honest, I didn't really notice her in that. Whereas in this, she's quite striking, and You know, I think she's
she's too
she's
good for
good. You know,
George.
she's good in the lead role, I think, in this one.
They'd make a great couple. Come on, Rob.
No, she's too good for it.
Anyway,
She should get with the joy of sex, man.
they'd have lovely children, wouldn't they? I think.
Zombie children. Yeah.
Look at that sexy
Anyway, so
zombie.
we find out this guy later on is called Guthrie.
Guthrie Wilson.
Guthrie Wilson.
Sounds like a folk singer, doesn't he?
Woody Guthrie, yeah. But,
So
right.
Edna tries to escape in the car, but of course George has the keys. So she then gets out of the car. But in typical heroin mode, manages to fall in the stream rather pathetically, for no good reason.
And she just screams in a posh voice. She goes, "Oh!"
Yes.
You know, if she was rough, she'd go, "Oh shit!"
Bloody hell.
Bloody hell! If she was a real Manx, she'd go, "I'm out of here."
Bloody hell.
Later, see ya.
So, of course, no one believes poor Edna when she finds George again at the landowners.
No.
Although it is established that Guthrie is a resident of the town who's homeless and who passed away a week or two previously.
We get quite a lot of backstory, don't we? The farmer's like, "Oh, that sounds like Looney Guthrie. Yeah, he used to do that with the cars. He used to have any car that pulled up. He used to have his hand in. Yeah."
And he's another actor who's been dubbed with quite a good. Sounds like quite a genuine kind of northern accent.
Northern accent.
Yeah, they just couldn't be bothered for George. They just gave George.
Really?
It's yeah.
Didn't they? Oh, I got that. Or Oliver-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So later on, they eventually find the house of Edna's sister, and it sounds
Katie.
Katie, is it? Yeah, and it seems their relationship is not particularly healthy. Or
Katie is such the 70s, you know, the hysterical woman on a plane when the plane's going down and they have to slap her repeatedly.
Yeah,
she
plays
plays it.
A thin film of sweat on her face. Got dark circles under her eyes, around her eyes.
Wild staring eyes, hysterical screaming. You just, oh God, it'd be that cue on Naked Gun where they're all queued up slapping her.
And she's got a bit of a taste of the golden brown, hasn't she? She likes to chase the dragon, I think, at the weekend.
She's cooking up heroin in there.
Yeah.
Who knew this went on in the Peak District in 1974? Anyway, Katie herself is disturbed by Guthrie.
Who does Katie live with? She lives with Martin, doesn't she?
Martin.
Martin.
Who's a photographer.
He's got a bald head and 70s hair at the side.
I think Martin's really a dogger, isn't he? He likes to go out into the countryside at night, doesn't he, and take photographs.
Yeah, Martin takes photos. Yeah.
Of the dark, in the dark.
Yeah.
Okay. And
that's the believer.
So so again, Katie escapes. Katie escapes, and outside the house, and so she escapes to find the husband out in the dark doing his flash photography.
Martin.
And the photography seems to distract Guthrie, who kind of retreats. And don't see him.
Well, it's Edna pulling up in the Mini, isn't it? I think the headlights. That's very like Night of the Living Dead, isn't it? Where the headlights seem to blind the zombie, and he sort of it distracts him and he runs off, and they sort of save it
through. Yeah, from Night of the Living Dead, they must have started with the template of that, and then worked out the other.
It also gives us a little clue of the weaknesses, doesn't it? Straight away, like an idea of something that could have an effect on these very formidable zombies as well.
Yes.
So,
anyway, the husband is kind of attacked by Guthrie as well, if I remember right. I'm a bit clouded in this bit now. I'm referring to my notes, but I don't remember the exact.
Martin is devoured. Yeah, they're quite strong, these zombies, aren't they? I think they just sort of crush his rib cage.
They're quite fast at times as well. They're quite quick. They're not.
They're very strong, aren't they? It's and also quite. They're not. They're not like the powder puff zombies you get now, where you can just push them to the side and they fall to the ground. They're a presence that ever coming, isn't it? They don't stop.
So Martin is killed by Guthrie, and the sister only barely escapes, which is when George and Edna finally show up, and they, similar to the shot in Night of the Living Dead, where the car turns up with the headlights on full beam.
And I think the next scene is the first time we get to see the sergeant, isn't it? Does he actually have a name, the sergeant?
I don't know.
He's just
I don't
referred to
know. Is he just? I didn't note a name for him at
sergeant
all.
the way through. Yeah,
But
it's Arthur Kennedy, isn't it?
He's an actor called Arthur Kennedy, who was like many actors in 70s Italian Spanish films. They would be brought in from Hollywood, from America, and perhaps their career in America in Hollywood was a bit on the wane. But they'd bring them over for 2, 3, 4. I don't know if it's days or just a couple of weeks, and they treat them to meals out and things like that. And
he's the one true actor in the film, is there?
He was in Lawrence of Arabia, wasn't he? I think.
Lawrence of Arabia. This guy's not a lightweight. He's been in some top notch material.
He plays it one pattern, and he's just angry. Immediately. Yeah,
I think it's quite a good performance because it's obviously setting up this conflict between later on him and George, and the inspector's disdain for anything kind of youthful or
counterculture. He just hates it.
Or some perverse. There's a great line he has later on about. I'll maybe talk about it later.
We'll get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of got an Irish accent. Which is
sometimes
American Irish,
yeah. It's historically accurate. I mean, Manchester and up north, we have a big Irish population.
Yeah.
So not totally out of the
I can't remember if he's. I think he does say "to be sure" maybe at one point.
Rob's trying to get all our Irish listeners
recording on a Tuesday.
Yeah, well, in his first encounter, he thinks that George and the other two are responsible for the murder of Martin. He calls them sadists.
Yeah, he needs no evidence, does he? Doesn't need the evidence.
Doesn't need the evidence. Well, this is perhaps what policing was like maybe not in. Well, maybe it was like that in England. But
if your hair grows past your ears, you're guilty.
Yeah,
I saw an interview with the director Jorge Grau, and he said that he gave an instruction to Arthur Kennedy to play the sergeant as somebody who never quite, he had ambitions to be the chief of police, but never quite got there, and he's kind of angry at the world, angry at the society. So that's why he's kind of so angry. I think even his police constables, he's even angry at them, isn't he? Throughout the film, it's kind of
playing somebody American, then Irish, then English, just playing in a spiral of confusion.
It certainly fits with his performance as well, from what he, how he plays it. The sergeant finds naked photographs of Sister Katie from photography, which obviously doesn't float his boat. Finds heroin.
We don't get to see them, do we? We don't really get to, because when I was watching, not them being pervert, but we didn't. They're kind of hidden from us a bit, aren't they? The photos.
Kind of, yeah. You see them very briefly, and then they're taken out of range of the camera again. So yeah, all these things make add further fuel to the sergeant's fire. Thinking he's
Satanist.
They're Satanists, they're perverts, and so on, and they're to blame for the husband's death. There's a line I've written down a note here that someone says. I think George says to Edna, "Oh, Katie," he's got a line that says, "We're in this mess together. We're in this mess together." And I can't remember which scene it was in, but it's around this. It must be around this time. I thought, well, that's quite another prescient thing, isn't it? Because that's what we're always being told, isn't it? That we're all in this together, and by various people in power. I thought
Are you suggesting this film was filmed at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3?
Well, in Manchester, it would be tier 2/tier 3. We don't quite know yet.
Depending on good old Andy Burnham. Yeah.
So we're just waiting to hear, aren't we? What tier?
So I think George hatches a plan to pinch the film and get it developed to kind of prove the innocence. He's like, I'm not going to rely on these bloody cappers, to...
It doesn't take much to distract the stupid police officer in the car, does it?
Yeah.
He starts talking to Edna how he's put on loads of weight, the police officer.
Just talking about Christine Galbo, and I think we'd all be distracted, really. Yeah. If she came over asking for a light, I think I'd like to give her one.
Oh, right. Okay.
We're talking about cigarettes still.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. Oh, I like it. Yeah. So yeah, they develop the film. They go to develop the film themselves rather than let the police find it, so they can get the pictures of Guthrie, attacking. Edna then gets a message that her sister, a bit later,
Yeah, they check into the hotel, don't they?
taken to
The old
Southgate. Yeah, they check into the hotel. That's right. Yes,
the old owl hotel that actually has an owl perched up in the hotel. That's a
real live
first.
owl in there. You walk into that place saying, "So, why is this called?" Oh, I see. There's a big owl up there on the perch.
And the receptionist is a bit the hotel owner's a bit snooty, and she's like, "Are you two involved with the murder?"
A little bit.
I don't. This is a house of respectability. And George is like, "Don't worry, darling. I don't want to stay here longer than I have to." Or something.
You can kind of imagine Barbara Windsor taking this role. Had it been like a UK film, she could have been the. Perhaps I'm just thinking of EastEnders.
Oh, get you!
So say.
We don't like these hippie types in here,
They're in hospital, and then Edna. Sorry, no, they're in a hotel, and at the hotel, Edna gets a message that her sister's been taken to. I don't know if you guys know it's Southgate Hospital.
Yeah. It's filmed at Barnes Hospital, Cheadle, which was a working hospital at the time. But now is a derelict hospital in Cheadle.
That's interesting.
I believe that's all the interior shots were shot in Italy, so that's why only the exterior was used. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was actually a hospital.
Yeah, one of those dodgy old Victorian hospitals.
Yeah.
I thought it was a youth hostel stop or something like a YHA. There's loads of them in the lakes, isn't there? But yeah.
So then George is in hospital, and he finds kind of bodies. He sees bodies being carried out the back in kind of these metal sealed, what seems like to be metal coffins.
They are really thick metal coffins, aren't they? The strangest coffins I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if the reason for that was ever revealed, or I don't know. They looked odd anyway. And inside the hospital, George goes and has a bit of a nosy with smoking everywhere, and he kind of starts speaking to the doctor, and then the doctor starts explaining to him about this aggressive newborn baby.
He's a really weird doctor, isn't he? He's like George is looking at the coffins, and he's like, "Do you want one? They're perfect for the long voyage home. How about it, young man? Should I make a reservation for you?" It's like
I think that's another obviously shipman case that never got brought to.
There's a lot of malpractice going on in that hospital.
He enjoys the mortuary a bit too much, I think. Yeah.
Anyway, there's kind of aggressive newborn baby that manages to bite George's finger after it's bitten the eyeball of a nurse. They say, "Well, what's causing the aggressive behaviour in this young baby?" And of course, we being the knowledgeable viewers that we are, we know what's causing it.
It's that bloody machine in that field.
And George puts two and two together, doesn't he? He's getting onto it now as well.
And the doctor, George kind of tells the doctor about the ultrasonic machine, and the doctor suddenly says, "Well, that's very interesting. I'd like to see it." And then the next scene, they just walk out, and they're both there, just looking at the ultrasonic machine. Yeah, so you're perhaps not the best doctor, whatever his name is.
Yeah, and the scientists are just like, "Doctor, you're a man of science. You don't think there's anything to this. We're surrounded by radiation, and I'm not attacking you, am I?" It's just completely. But the doctor kind of just gives up pretty easy, doesn't he? He's like, "There's no way the government's going to listen. They don't listen to us on more serious things, So there's no point.
We might as well give up." Yes, it does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? So after this scene, George goes to collect the photographs that he's asked to be developed at this little shop. Surprisingly enough, the photographs are developed, and there's no sign of Guthrie on them at all.
No Guthrie. Yeah.
No.
Lo and behold, who's behind George in the shop? The sergeant. He finds them, and of course he knows now who's stolen the evidence, and this throws even further suspicion on them.
This confirms it to the sergeant, doesn't it, that they are responsible, and he just has to pin.
They don't arrest them at this point. which I thought was a bit odd. I thought, why have they just let
this
them
was
go?
one of my this was one of my favourite scenes because you get the classic line. Do you want to go for it, Carl? The
was
the
it?
critique of George.
Yeah. What is it he says?
You're all the same, the lot of you, with your long hair and faggot clothes. Drugs, sex, every sort of filth.
You young people with your
Drugs, sex, and every sort of filth.
I thought that would be a great line for the intro. You know, like the lines from Night of the Living Dead. I thought that would be a great line for a future episode of the podcast.
Drugs, sex, and all sorts of filth.
So yes, because the sergeant has for some reason not arrested George and Edna. They go looking for Guthrie in the church kind of crypt through the graveyard, the cemetery. Sure enough, they go into the crypt, and there's a casket that should have Guthrie's body in it, and it's not there. It's empty. And again, I think this is another kind of nod to Night of the Living Dead, taking the action into the crypt, which is kind of a confined environment. This is like the Night of the Living Dead, where the setting is just a house and they're trapped. Although they're not here in this setting for long, I thought this was like another bit of a nod to Night of the Living Dead.
This is 50 minutes in this bit. I remember in the film because I kept on looking there to think, because obviously we're very spoiled with modern horrors, aren't we? We get lots of things given to us, so you have to, it is a film that you work with, isn't it? You have to stay with it, because it's quite, its main criticism that people give it is its pace. But I think
70s films generally are a little bit slower pace, aren't they? Than they tend to like to explain everything, don't they, and show every journey. Where modern films just cut straight to the action, don't they? A little bit, but I can forgive it that.
That's true. It's quite nice spending 90 minutes on a cold autumn evening, in front of the TV in these kind of characters and zombies company, I think. And it's a bit of a reminder of home as well for us. Strange.
So there's blood dripping down all the walls of the crypt, isn't there? I think he looks up into one of the alcoves and there's just a body with bleeding from the eyes.
That's right, yes.
So it looks like Guthrie's been having a bit of fun.
Yeah, they're promptly shut in by someone. Someone shuts the kind of door from the outside. I don't know if that's Guthrie who does that, because he appears and starts to attack them, of course.
Edna's got a very posh scream, hasn't she, all the way through? It's like, George!
Because it's strange. He gets some of the pouring blood, doesn't he? He gets some of the pouring blood from the wall, and he kind of anoints the other bodies in the crypt by kind of dabbing their eyes with this blood.
Yeah, it brings them.
That was a pretty cool idea. Yeah,
it's a great idea. I really thought it was kind of I think it's a bit of a religious undertone to that, which isn't surprising, I suppose, from an Italian-Spanish co-production. Anyway, yes, they do manage to escape from the. There are three Walking Dead in the crypt now. They manage to escape out of the dug.
There's like a hole in the wall, isn't there? Yeah,
a hole in the wall which kind of leads out to a dug grave. Dug hole from.
Is this the police officer bit? The police
officer. Craig shows up and they kind of all manage to escape, but they soon driven. Craig, you silly bastard! Keep your radio on, you lad. And they're all forced back into the church, but obviously Craig drops his radio. And then they happen to find a loaded gun on a church wall, because every church in Manchester has to have a loaded gun on the wall.
Just needed. They are needed in case the dead rise. Simple as that.
And he's not a great shot, though, is he, Carl? Did you? He kind of took a few inches off gave her a bit of a haircut, I think.
Yeah, and this is where we find out, of course, that the rules are different for these zombies, because the old lady zombie takes a headshot, and does it stop her?
No,
it doesn't stop her.
There's only one thing can stop them, we find out.
They kind of concocts a plan, or Craig, really, he suggests the plan. He's a bit foolhardy, really, to make a run for his radio.
Craig
literally doesn't. Crazy Craig. He's just crazy.
If he
And he,
if he was in Star Trek, he'd be wearing red. He's dead meat. As soon as you see Craig, you know he's dead meat.
He's all the way. He's the anti-Edwards of this film, isn't he?
Yeah.
The zombies are waiting for him outside. They're just holding up a whole tombstone. They're just holding up.
They're strong. Yeah.
Yeah, launch this on top of him. He doesn't stand a chance, really, does he?
No. Zombies. The Living Dead, Walking Dead, whatever you want to call them. They end up. They get Craig. They pin him down. They end up beating him.
That was one of the glorious scenes, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's and this is one of the rumors about the lost scene, isn't there? Because there's a bit where the old lady reaches down to grab his eyes, and there's all this debate which I've read about the lost eyeball scene.
Right.
Is there a sequence somewhere for her enjoying a bit of eyeball pate?
We kind of, I don't know if it's just after, and there's no eyeball there, or if some ghost one out and just kind of does a slightly weird cut. Oh, that's interesting.
Because it's a really gross scene where they're eating intestines, but they thought an eyeball was too much. It's like.
No, we don't want to go there.
I don't know if I've watched a different version, but there's a bit where she's eating something. It looks like an eyeball.
She reaches down. She reaches down, and the shot goes behind, and then she's obviously eating the eyeballs. But the whole.
You don't see in graphic detail. Yeah.
So George and Edna escape, and poor Craig is eaten, and the sergeant thinks, because there's no response from the radio, that George and Edna have probably used their satanic ways to not only kill the Craig the policeman, but also they've burnt the zombies, haven't they? They found out the fire.
The detective thinks the desecrated graves. They've killed somebody and eaten them, and it's like
bloody Satanists.
This fuels his fire. It proves his theory to him even more.
That's why if you watch this in Easy Rider, you realise you have to get your hair cut, or else there's a lot of judgments in there.
And he gives like a shoot to kill order, even though none of them have got guns. But he kind of he's getting pretty serious now.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, there's a story I read, and I think it might be in the booklet from the DVD release years ago, that there was the chief of police in Manchester in the 1980s was a chap called James Anderton, and apparently he was really keen for this film to be confiscated because of the depiction, Arthur Kennedy's depiction of the
GMP
sergeant. Yeah, because it was it was all kind of high, kind of this almost fire and brimstone kind of portrayal of a police officer, and that was something that he was accused of.
Suggesting that the police are full of bigots and racists, which, of course, because you don't want to make that suggestion.
It's so outdated now, isn't it? That there's certainly none of that now. Yeah.
No. But apparently, this was why GMP were particularly keen on seizing this particular film. It might be a myth, but I wouldn't put it past them, would you? Especially with them.
No, it sounds very plausible. Yeah.
Anyway, George escapes, and then he tries to shut down the machine, but he's prevented from doing that. But it's here that he learns that the machine's ultrasonic radiation machine's range has been increased to 5 miles. It was only at 1.
When you look at the prop for that machine, you think it would have a range of about 5 meters, don't you? But it's certainly spinning faster near the end of the film. So 5 miles is plot. Yeah.
It dawns on George here that actually the bodies in the morgue are probably likely to be becoming animated very, very soon.
Yeah.
Edna at this point is kind of on a separate investigation. She returns to her sister's house and finds Martin. I think it's Martin, is it? The zombie husband.
Yeah.
Zombie Martin.
She managed to fight him off. At this point, George reappears, and they run Martin over.
He doesn't have a good run in this film, does he, Martin? He doesn't. It's not going well for him. So,
Yes, I'm sure he gets,
I don't know about running, but he seems to get to all these locations on foot very quickly because he hasn't got a car, don't forget. So I think he's like Usain Bolt or something. Yeah.
Where are we up to? So George and Edna now go by car to a petrol station. He grabs a can of kerosene in order to presumably light
paraffin.
What do you say?
The Scottish lady calls it paraffin.
And,
very distinctive accent.
yeah, because she's Scottish, isn't she? That's right. And he leaves. Edna, for some reason, stays at the petrol station. I can't remember why.
There's like a Down syndrome daughter, isn't there? And she goes to grab the whiskey, and she's like, "Don't give her the whiskey. She might not have any bloody money." Like,
yeah, it's one of those scenes where you think, I mean, they wouldn't have put something like that in a film now. And it's done very quickly, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit distasteful.
Poppycock.
We find out later that she basically trashed the petrol station and ended up heading to the hospital. I think, didn't she?
Right,
Taken to the hospital.
So she's certainly very traumatized and all of a sudden very violent, but off screen. When George returns to the house himself, but it's a trap, and the police are waiting for him, and they arrest him.
Yeah.
But this just later on, he manages to escape from custody. He returns to Southgate Hospital again, and at the garage. Yeah, from the garage, it seems Edna's been escorted to the Southgate Hospital. So George heads off that way, but the police are in hot pursuit now. They're following him, and back at the hospital, things are really kicking off because
I would say it's my favorite. My favorite sequence is the hospital. Yeah.
Sure. We know things are happening now. So yeah, there's some carnage at the hospital. The bodies that we saw a bit earlier on have all kind of been reactivated. I think the poor doctor tries to fight some of them off, but gets an axe in his head for his trouble.
The nurse on the reception desk. She gets slowly killed by a group of them, and then there's a gratuitous breast scene, isn't there?
Yeah, they rip her breasts off and take her innards out. Apparently, the director chose the actress because she had quite small breasts, so they could put the fake breast on a flat chest. But yeah. She was a friend of his wife's or something, I think he said.
I see. Wow. Friend of my wife. Would you mind just stripping off?
Would you like a part in a film? Yeah.
Get your small boobs out and get eaten.
My name's George. Yeah, actually, the director's name is George. So I wonder if that's a kind of
Jorge.
Yeah. So that's all that Spanish listeners gone. And so the sister, Kate, is it Katie, the sister?
Yeah.
Tries to escape with the doctor. She goes up in the lift and seemingly manages to evade the zombies because she's on her way. I don't know how she knows she's there, but she's on her way to find Edna, who's also now in the hospital.
She just knows. She just knows. Sisters can feel these things.
So she finds a room that Edna's now in, and she walks, but she's walking a bit strangely, and all is not as it appears because Katie is in fact now one of the Walking Dead, and she starts to attack Edna by. I think she's got a pair of scissors and she plunges it into her.
Yeah, repeatedly. She stabs her about 3 or 4 times. Yeah,
she survives that for a little while, doesn't she, Edna? Yeah. So anyway, all this is going on. George eventually rocks up. And he can hear Edna, and he runs up the stairs trying to get to her.
Oh, hang on, we've can we just go back? We've missed out the George interrogation scene with the sergeant, and this is where he gets accused of being a Satanist, and they're saying this artifact that they've got where it's like a Buddha tweaking a nipple, and he said, "No, I was just taking that up to some bloke in Windermere, mate, you know."
Come on, Mary Poppins, it's not Meg.
I think that's where the sergeant gives him a slap round the chops as well. And he makes the famous tea towel escape. I don't think I've ever seen a tea towel used to escape from the clutches of the police, really. But yeah, he managed to escape out of a window.
Police make a gun, where Liz Nielsen would throw a towel at someone's face and they go, "Oh!"
Maybe it was like a steaming hot towel. Yeah.
It
one of those Chinese restaurant towels or something. Yeah, I don't know. But he shows up at the hospital a bit too late, doesn't he? Because I think Katie's
late because
already got the contact lenses.
Edna's a zombie. Poor Edna's a zombie as well. Katie and Edna. Yeah. So George gets there and he thinks Edna, but he has a look at her eyes, and just there. Kind of
it's still red. Hot, but she's a hot zombie.
Yeah, I think she could bite me.
Would he still take a chance?
Well,
away from like the festering wounds, you'd probably be okay, wouldn't you?
42nd Street in Manchester, you probably see worse sights in there, Rob. You know what I mean?
She does look like a girl from back in the day, doesn't she? She's like got red eyes. She looks like she's had one too many Zambucas, and she's she's willing to go in for it. So.
George is horrified at this point because he knows Edna's gone, but right behind him, who should turn up? The sergeant.
Yeah, but he pushes it, doesn't he? Push you into a room, an inferno, a room which is
he lights his axe on fire and then starts.
There's a towering inferno. There's a room which just contains the fire. This one towering inferno room he pushes zombies into. Yeah.
Anyway, the sergeant turns up and he's loaded, and the sergeant doesn't mess about. He must shoot him about 5 or 6 times.
He does. Yeah.
Without even thinking about it. And of course, poor George is he's dead. He's brown bread.
Yeah, I didn't give.
You get the you get the classic line, don't you? I wish the dead could come back to life, you bastard, so I could kill you again.
Yeah, you get. Yeah, spoiler alert. He gets his wish to a little bit, but
sorry for my Irish accent. Anybody who's Irish,
I don't know what.
And this was the other part I thought was a bit like Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead's ending is really kind of bleak.
It's the same, isn't it? Yeah, the shot in the head, and it's horrible.
Level, it's still a bit of a downer.
But that's probably where I realised I wasn't a major fan of this. I didn't really care that George was brown bread at this point. I just didn't care. I actually, I was prepared. I was happy for everyone to die, which
everyone does actually, apart from some. Yeah. So next day, everything seems to be kind of right again, and there's the police talking to the press, and the inspector decides to give himself a little bit of a break. He's had enough of the events of the last few days, and he books a room in what was it, Lee? The Owl Hotel?
The Old Owl Hotel. Yeah, there's only one hotel.
Peace and quiet.
You have to have an owl when you stay there.
Apparently, the director said there was a story where he gave the Arthur Kennedy some of his Spanish wine. He said, "Try this." He turned away. And then looked back, and Arthur had necked the entire bottle, but they still had this scene to film. They still had the final scene of the movie. So when he's stumbling around, looking a bit tired in his hotel, I think he was a bit half caught.
He was dying to get up, lying on that bed, wasn't he? That's all he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then sadly, he had to do some acting for a few minutes.
So what he says, he wants to get some peace and quiet away from this. He calls it permissive rot. So he's spouting his venom, his fury, even to the bitter end. But in the hotel, of course, who should be waiting for him in the room that he books? Zombie George.
Zombie George. I mean, what is the radius of all this action? Because how far are these zombies walking? Because I've been to Derbyshire and I've been to the lakes. You can drive for miles. And they have a homing signal, don't they? Just manage.
George is Usain Bolt, Rob. He's got a great distance on him. He's got a great speed.
Isn't he? He can imagine being quite a quick runner.
Maybe he was on his motorbike. I don't know.
Yeah, they're suggesting that these zombies, the undead, as well, maintain vendettas from when they were alive as well, because George is definitely targeting him. He could have killed anyone, couldn't he? Could have killed everyone in the Owl Hotel.
Are these zombies of what they're doing? Because there must be an element of consciousness there if he's deliberately targeting the sergeant, which he
there
may
is
well
a degree of intelligence, because they do kind of bit of teamwork as well. We see like 2 zombies carrying a tombstone, don't we, at one point, and things like that. So there is a degree, and kind of.
They almost high five, don't they? They almost high five when you eviscerate that one, and I'll eviscerate this one, and we'll meet up in the middle.
High five zombies.
No, we can go to before we move on to H3 because we're at the end now. But we can talk about. I mean, I'll as devil's advocate. I've already said a couple of times it's not the film for me, but I can appreciate big bits in it. As I said,
it's got some good scenes, hasn't it? Yeah, I can understand why it's a cult film. Yeah, definitely. It's got
the photography in it's beautiful, and it's the soundtrack's great, but the pace did kill me. I was Walking Dead by the end, and you said 90 minutes, and I'll have to double check because it felt like I'd been sat there for 3 hours at some point. I'd lost feeling in certain parts of my limbs, and they were like dead. And and maybe I just need to watch a few more dubbed films as well, because the dubbing really threw me out of the film for a large portion. That's my sort of critique of it, but it's
It's not perfect. I mean, it's only got 6.8 on IMDb for a reason, but I can understand why it has attracted the cult aficionados to this movie, because it has got some standouts.
I was just going to say, I think, of course, it's a film with its problems. But Rob, I was saying to you a little earlier that I'm the kind of film watcher who I will accept certain things in a film being perhaps not quite as they should be if there's enough interesting stuff going on around it. So for me, this film has a good and interesting plot. It's got a good soundtrack. It's just that it's one of those films that's got an interesting kind of story and history to it. And for all those reasons, I think for me, I've got to send this great film flying away on that helicopter to freedom, because it's a film that I've kind of come back to quite a few times, and I've always enjoyed this one. And also, as you said, I've given this to people, and they've enjoyed it too. It's one of those I've thought, I think someone else might enjoy this, and occasionally they have. Is the Living Dead Manchester Morgue going to the morgue?
Well, for me, it stays in the morgue, and which is fine because it's about it's the living dead at the morgue, and it can stay in the morgue. But I have to admit, if it'd be a shame if it didn't exist, because, like you said, there's not many films set in Manchester, even though it's not really set in Manchester. But it does.
Is there a morgue?
Is there even a morgue in Manchester in the film? There isn't, is there? But
no, it's just the van with Manchester Morgue on the back, wasn't it? Yeah, it was just for some reason they have to send everything to the Lake District. I don't know why.
But this is where I contradict myself, because I think it is an important film, and because I do love film, I have to say that it'd be a shame if it didn't exist. So therefore, I'm probably suggesting it should survive, because if I put it in the morgue, it doesn't survive.
What about you?
Right, so you two are going to have to convince me Halloween 3 is a good film, because I just want to say to everybody, just don't bother with this film, really. So I'm going to sit back and let you two discuss this.
I'm quite passionate about this film. Like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, right? It gets a lot of stick. It literally, you type it in on Google, you type it in on a film review, and it goes one of two ways. Either it is slated as the worst film in a sequence of films, or it's slated as a hidden masterpiece by a small group of people, which I include myself as one of them. And I think part of it is like what Cal just mentioned earlier, just like I said about 10 minutes previous, is that it's got enough good in it and enough key moments to keep you into it. And it is completely flawed. It's completely flawed. The plot alone is insane. The plot is insane. There's no, Michael Myers. We have to say that it's called Halloween 3, but I was chatting with Carl about this, and the idea was it's supposed to be an offshoot under the Halloween banner, but obviously to sell tickets at the box office, they called it Halloween 3 and then Season of the Witch, because it's set in the Halloween world, but it's not Michael Myers. And then that's, I think for most people, when you start watching it, you are immediately taken aback. I remember as a kid waiting for Michael and then suddenly it's about some crazy witch who wants to take over the world and kill children.
I will say the soundtrack is bloody amazing. The opening credits, the music is amazing. It's like futuristic, very different from Halloween 1 and 2. I did like that.
Yeah, as soon as John Carpenter's soundtrack comes in, it gets you, and the pace is not bad actually. It does have a few laggy moments. The main character, like you said earlier, like George, has got big dick syndrome.
Big dick energy.
Yeah, they kind of look like each other, don't they? Which was, obviously we called this tonight's podcast like Halloween 3 versus Living Dead. He is similar to George, isn't he? He is very similar. He's like George, a bit older, and because it's set in, it's 1980. Is it 84? Halloween 3?
2 actually.
82, right? So, and one was Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. That was 77.
4.
74. So 6 years later, we can imagine it. It's 6 years later. George somehow survived, and he became a doctor. And he moved to this beautiful little town called Shamrock, Silver Shamrock, and so I mean, straight away from the opening soundtrack, and it takes a while for the main plot to unravel, doesn't it? That's the big thing with it. I mean, the plot is this: it's the holiday Halloween season. Children seem to be becoming addicted to buying these. The latest craze is these Halloween masks made by the Silver Shamrock Company, and we are introduced in the first few minutes, isn't it, to a man who's escaped. It looks like he's escaped from that factory or something, from the factory, the Silver Shamrock factory, and he is literally hunted down by these otherworldly, like almost like android-esque killers, aren't they?
But they just look like guys in suits.
Yeah, they're like, and
Exactly.
and it's, yeah, and
Can we discuss the possible spoiler here that there's no Michael Myers and no Jamie Lee Curtis in this?
Technically, we can mention basically another thing which people critique is that about it is that it's set more in our world, isn't it? So it's like another world, but it's a world where Halloween is just a film because there's clips of Halloween, isn't there, on the TVs?
Yeah, right.
And Halloween is a film, a classic film. It actually even lauds its own classic status, doesn't it?
I am actually willing to forgive it for that because I think it's actually quite a cool idea to have a Halloween themed film every year, like a kind of Twilight Zone film. That's released every Halloween. I'm kind of willing to forgive it for that. To be honest, but it's worth mentioning.
I think the problem this film had was they marketed it in such a way that they weren't clear, and I think lots of people expected, when it came out, for it to be another Michael Myers film.
As I did when I was a kid, I flicked it on, expecting to see Michael stalking around and his usual slasher thing, and it's not. But it is something else, and it's what I saw and what I remember. I really enjoyed.
It would be interesting to see what the reaction to this film would be if they just called it Season of the Witch. Putting the kind of Halloween 3 bracket around it.
It creeped the hell out of me, the idea of being trapped in the mask. There's a scene in it with the boys that we're going to talk about later.
Really loved the beginning of the film. I thought it was very atmospheric. The kind of thunder and the lightning, the guy running away from this weird suited guy, and sort of makes his way to that garage, doesn't he? And what does he say? That they're coming, or
it's the threat, like they're here, like and it's straight away. Is that and also this is John Carpenter? It's the idea that this unseen force is coming towards you, and it's a shift away from the old slasher film in that sense. There's this unemotional, it's got still the emotionless killers, but they are like working in unison. They are obviously like otherworldly, non-human androids, robots. It's great, and the opening. Some of the deaths in it are quite, I think it gets laughed at a little bit. Some of the deaths in it, they are quite gratuitous, aren't they? There's a tramp on the dock, and that he gets his head pulled off. There's lots of crushing because these are like, there's remorseless robots.
I think a lot of the gore scenes in this were probably added after they'd finished the film because I don't know if you guys know, but this was originally written by a gentleman called Nigel Neal, who was responsible for. He's like a British science fiction writer, and he'd written things like Quatermass in England. And Carpenter approached him and just said to him, "Can you write a script called Halloween 3 and kind of see what you come up with?" So the
Season of the Witch.
So the original idea was his, but he ended up taking his name off the credits, and his name doesn't appear in the credits anymore. So I do wonder if perhaps they changed and messed with it quite enough for him to kind of think, "Oh, I need to take my name off this now." I wonder if these added scenes of gore made him think, "Oh, this isn't my film anymore." I do wonder if perhaps there was something a bit more cerebral in mind, in the first.
Yeah, because it's got a message. I mean, the message is not as it's not as nuanced as like the last film, but it's definitely got a message. It's about the over commercialization of Halloween, It's about Halloween just becoming just a gimmick that you package up in your cell, and everyone's forgotten the true meaning of it.
Yes.
And the true, there's quite a dark side to Halloween, where it comes from. And that's the big core message. It's just got kids banging on these creepy masks and, collecting candy and stuff in the faces.
Yeah.
But there's and that's why we're vulnerable, isn't it? The nemesis in the film is playing on that vulnerability that we've forgotten what it is.
That's where we're vulnerable with the kind of mass consumerism of this particular product.
Yeah, you can't talk about H3 without mentioning that as soon as you mention Halloween 3 to anyone, they immediately sing the song.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
And yeah, I'm not going to, because...
I feel half of this movie, like 45 minutes of this movie, is this advert. I think that...
Yeah, there's an advert. Yeah, the advert in the film is so it's the London Bridge is falling down theme, but it's been changed, the jingle, to how many days to Halloween, and it goes silver. So it goes 10 more days to Halloween, and it does the same thing, but it gets faster as the film goes on. That advert, you see it more and more and more, and it's got loads of images of children wearing the creepy masks, sitting in front of the TV, waiting for this advert, and the advert's promising on Halloween night. There'll be a grand event.
I've got a theory here. I think because you two are dads and I'm not, I think you two are more used to hearing adverts, annoying adverts. And for me, I just found every time that came on, it just really grated me. It was kind of like chalk on a blackboard.
But I think that's it. I saw it years ago, pre-dad, and it's supposed to jingle. It's supposed to be tedious. It's supposed to be
kind of deliberately fashioned to be like that. In that sense.
Well, half of the movie is this advert. It's just like,
and it's those tedious adverts you do get on children's telly where adults phase out and the child takes it in, and that's the whole. The whole thing that these kids the kids immersing themselves into thinking Halloween's about stuff in the face and wearing silly masks. And that's it hasn't got many messages, this film.
Children begging for candy.
Yeah. So we'll go on to plot. The plot is this man who was being chased down by these awful robot things. He ends up in hospital, doesn't he? Yeah.
The hospital.
Yes. Yeah, in the hospital. And of course, the chase is not over. In the hospital, we have the merciless zombie, whatever they are, robots. We don't know what they are yet. Yeah. The androids, we have them. And one of them enters the hospital and kills him in a really brutal fashion.
What was it, like a kind of poking through his eye or something, or crushing his eye sockets?
Yeah, it's totally unnecessary. Could just could easily turn off his oxygen machine, could strangle him. But no, he crushes through his eyes, and
he coolly walks out, saunters out of the hospital room, and then just past a nurse who's sort of catatonic, and then he goes outside the hospital, jumps in the car, and just pours gasoline on himself and lights himself on fire. Which I think at this moment in the film, I'm like, I'm down with this film. This is shit hot. This is amazing. But
we are introduced to our protagonist. He's the doctor. What's the doctor called? Who we said he's like
Dr. Chalice.
Dr. Chalice, Dr. Chalice with a tash and slicked hair, and he's a drinker, smoker, ladies' man, and we know this because in the first few minutes of meeting him, he chats to another nurse on duty and pats her on the bum, and she loves it. He flirts with another doctor on duty, and he wants to take him for dinner. And there's a lot of mentions of taking women for dinner. And he does very little doctoring, doesn't he? In the first few minutes, he literally tells people what to do. He's a little bit
a love doctor, isn't he?
He's a love doctor, and he's joyous sex again. But and he's immediately interested in this case, isn't he? Because the man who got killed, who had his head crushed, he was holding a mask in his hand, wasn't he? A silver shamrock mask. It was the pumpkin mask, I think. And that immediately intrigues him to become a private investigator and forget that he's a doctor on duty.
So hang on, you've forgotten about the other trigger, the other main trigger for Dr. Chalice. You know, we know he likes his women.
Oh, he loves his women, yeah.
The man who's been killed, who should have up at the hospital, lo and behold,
ate his daughter.
He's rather attractive, young, early 20s, say, daughter.
Yeah, and Dr. Chalice doesn't, he's obviously interested, but he's more interested in the woman. And he immediately is prepared to become a private investigator and completely forget his duty. And he goes off on a little road trip immediately to look into about this man who was killed, this mysterious man. And it's within minutes, isn't it? They check in a motel, don't they, almost instantly? It's like the quick.
She finds the father's diary, doesn't she? And she finds this entry about the masks. Her father going to the town to buy some masks, so they've got a lead there. And like you say, they check into the motel, rather seedy motel.
And he, as a gentleman, he says to her, just to show that Me Too a little bit, but Me Too in the 80s. He says to her, he suggests to her that I can sleep on the couch, and she goes, "I'd rather not be alone." And then straight away he's straight in for the kill, and it's a great, it's quite a long, 80s sex sequence, isn't it? Lots of.
Does grief tend to make you horny? I don't know. It does seem quite close to a father's death, which is interested in the carnal affairs.
Yeah, and I didn't mention the fact is that when they check into the motel, they meet a really obnoxious family, don't they?
Buddy Senior and Buddy Junior, I think, isn't it? The doc nearly gets killed by a BMX flying off the back of the car.
Only in the 1980s. In the cinema of the 1980s, does this happen? A flying BMX.
I think I had that BMX as well, by the way. Yeah, it was pure nostalgia there for that.
Well, the most revolting family, and fat dad, fat son, wife is too loud, and they don't want to listen, and they try and ask them questions. I don't know why they would go to that family to investigate about the father's disappearance, and the father's a salesman for the greatest salesman for the Silver Shamrock Company, isn't he? So he's connected to the mass as well. And they find out, I think, that the family are going to visit the factory the following day. But isn't there there's another crime, isn't there? There's another murder, isn't there, that night when they're staying at the motel in between bowling?
Yeah, the homeless guy. There's like CCTV everywhere, isn't there? There's also some like weird curfew where everybody's got to be sort of locked away and in the home by 9 o'clock or something. And I think the doc bumps into the homeless guy. It allows him to swig from his bottle. It's not very COVID-19 compliant.
It's amazing. When I saw that scene, I winced and thought about hand gel. Yeah, he just gives him a swig of his bottle. Yeah, it's
horrible. COVID 1982.
COVID was waiting even in 82. So,
and the homeless guy says, he's got an issue because he won't hire any local people. The boss of the factory won't hire any local people, and he's brought everybody in from the outside.
Yeah, all these strange-looking people who look the same and walk around in suits.
The homeless guy, I don't think we get a name for this guy, do we? But he returns to his kind of home, would you say, or whatever it is, underneath an underpass, and he's got his cheese from a can. He's got a fine meal that he's preparing himself.
He's got a second-hand whiskey and cheese from a can.
Squirty cheese.
Yeah. And he meets one of those android guys, doesn't he? Who murders him in a really violent way. His head's removed and it goes to like a shadow of it for some reason. And we see like loads of squirts and spray, don't we? Like almost like a party popper going off.
Now, at this point, I should just say that in the UK, Halloween 3 has never really, to this day, it's never really been like properly available in an uncut format. The old VHS.
Is it a 15?
It's a 15, and to maintain that 15 years ago, they cut the film to ribbons. It was like, so this was out, the scene with the eyes earlier on was out. They cut loads out, about just over 2 minutes worth of stuff. And years ago, I bought a DVD of this in the UK, thinking, oh yeah, cool, widescreen, it'd be uncut. And they still managed to edit out a couple of gore scenes for some reason, which I thought, well, what's the point in that?
It does.
You don't even need to anymore.
We'll talk about it, but it crosses the taboo line, doesn't it, with children? Basically for years in Hollywood and all, you were not allowed to show any harm befalling children. Even like picking them up, throwing them, anything.
Oh yeah.
But this film has no qualms with that, does it?
It doesn't mess. No.
The lady in the motel room gets blasted by the silver shamrock.
That's a cool thing.
Her eyes are blown open, the mouth's blown open, and then we get the locusts or wasps or whatever they are, like crawling out of the mouth.
Yeah, there's. You mentioned the film, and the set pieces, these sequences, these are the strengths of the film, aren't they? Because it's like that. The effects are pretty decent. It's like she notices the badge, the silver shamrock badge on the back of the mask. She's playing around with it, and then she notices like a microchip of some type, and that immediately sets like a laser beam which like fries her whole face, and she goes, at first she just ages terribly, and then because it's very 80s latex melty face and dying, and
that actually did creep me out a bit, because I do have a little thing about stuff coming out of mouths and eyes and stuff like that. That does creep me out.
And that's what disturbs everyone in the motel, isn't it? Because her body's brought out by the paramedics and the ambulance who just turn up very quickly, and the doctor post coitus and his beautiful 80s lady. They run out into the night and they meet the obnoxious family, and you could see that somebody's being took into the back of an ambulance, because he's a doctor. He finally remembers that he's a doctor again. He informs them that, and he says, "Where are you taking them?" Because they're obviously not taking them to a hospital. They're taking them to the Silver Shamrock factory, which is a bit odd. That's where you take patients, to a mask factory.
Is it the following morning or later on that night we get to meet who turns out to be the villain of the piece?
He's great in it.
Yeah, and he explains that the lady was the victim of what he calls a misfire.
Yes. Yeah, we get a bit of exposition from him.
Why is there something firing in a mask? They should be never firing a mask.
It's a misfire, and he promises the doctor, who's obviously concerned, because he did have say the Hippocratic oath and everything. So he promises the doctor that she'll be fine and she's in full recovery and she'll be better than ever. And so the doctor and his girlfriend, although he's the lady he's with, and then the whole American obnoxious family. They're all there in the reception waiting to go on a tour of this Silver Shamrock factory, aren't they, the following day? And
we get the chief salesman getting a tour, really, and he kind of, the doc and Ellie managed to sort of get in with the tour, really. Yeah, they kind of tag along, don't they, really? We see the hand-painted masks.
Yeah, it's so ordinary and dull. I suppose, if you're not a fan of the film at this point, you probably lost you in this bit, because literally, it is a tour. You literally watch every minute of the tour. You walk around the latex factory, and there's a really protracted shots of how latex masks are made, and it could have been cut to like about 5 minutes, but they go around the whole factory. And there's one room, isn't there? There's a room called a processing room or something. Final processing, which is cordoned off, and that's like big alarm bells for the doc.
Yes. Can't go in there because it's straight out trade secrets. We'd have to tell you everything.
And is at this point where they're separated from the American family, or are they all still together? I can't remember, but so
they do get separated from them. But
I think this is where Ellie sees her dad's car in a factory, and the suited guys block her off. Again, it's trade secret, guys. We can't show you.
And they decide to there's not much they can do, so they have to leave, don't they? And they head back, but planning on obviously sneaking into the factory afterwards. But the motel gets raided, doesn't it? Later that evening, by obviously, because now the head of the Silver Shamrock factory is the evil guy in the film. He's sent his men to fetch them because he knows that they know something. This is where they get caught, don't they? There's a big chase sequence, isn't there? It goes around the motel.
Well, it's that weird knitting robot that he kind of. The villain says he later reveals that he found in something from the late 1800s or something.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I checked out with this knitting robot, and that was from the 1800s. I was like,
yeah, because he's obviously So it's giving a hint that he's into robotics, isn't it? So it shows that he's fascination. He's got this like knitting robot, which.
I don't think there was too much robotics going on 110 years
But
ago.
basically the doctor and the girl they get seized, don't they, by the robot people, and they get took to the factory. And we know at this point now we're going to start finding out what's really going on with these, with the company and the mass. Carl, do you want to go on to the next bit?
They kind of take him on like the real tour.
And,
then they reveal stuff.
Yeah, so the real tour, basically, he's actually obviously him and Ellie have been separated, but he's actually secured to a chair, isn't it? Because obviously they abducted him and they've secured him to a chair and they put a creepy mask on his face.
And they switch the TV on, and you can see a picture of the Buddy family being led into a room that's kind of like a prison room.
This is where we get the full
test on the door, and of course they say they want them to give them their opinions on some new advertising that they're going to do. So if you could sit down and watch the TV.
Yeah, and the advert comes on, of course, and the boy is urged to put on his mask. So the boy puts on his pumpkin mask. Now this is where it crosses the line a little bit. In the fact is he puts on the mask, the advert starts to play, and the mask reacts with the advert, and he dies a really horrible, gruesome death, doesn't he, in front of his parents? Yeah,
insects, roaches, snakes, spiders, all kind of things coming out of this kind of this crushed, shriveled.
Yeah, his head crushes slowly, and it's it's done quite graphically, and then there's a big close-up shot of everything coming out of the mask, and obviously
snakes and other insects that have escaped, take care of the rest of the family while they're in there. It's quite a long, protracted scene, really. And
in some ways, this whole evil layer that he has is almost like a Bond movie. It kind of feels a bit Bond movie fact where he's got to explain his evil plot, to the dog, hasn't he? And
he does the thing as well of placing the hero in an easily escapable situation.
It's tied to a chair with the TV on, because we know at 9 o'clock or whatever, after the Halloween 1's being shown on the TV, but we know later on that evening there was a special promotion for Silver Shamrock, and we know now that the promotion is that advert, which will, of course, if you're wearing a mask, your head's going to shrivel and snakes and spiders are going to come out of your brain. He explains in great detail, doesn't he, that why he's doing this. He tells the doctor that basically people have forgotten the meaning of Halloween. It used to be a time for rivers running and blood, children screaming.
Resurrect the old rites of Halloween, and the hills running red with the blood of animals and children.
And he instructs him. It's a simple circuitry, and we get lots of shots of all these robot people he's built, because we found out he's built them. Are actually putting these shamrock chips on the back of all the masks. Which is the final process, and we know those chips react to the advert, and they basically lead to whoever's wearing the mask and sees the
implication being when this TV broadcast goes out at 9 o'clock that presumably families all across America are going to get wiped out by these.
His end game isn't great, is it? His end game is basically just wants to kill as many people as he can on one night. It's
children, he says. He says it's a trick on the children.
Yeah, it's a proper trick or treat, isn't it? It's there's no treat. Is there?
Very much a trick. Very much.
Of course, the doctor's horrified, but there's not much he can do. He's stuck in this room with his mask on. But as soon as the evil toy maker leaves the room, he manages to get his mask off, doesn't he? And he manages.
And this bit as well, Lee, you mentioned this the other day, where Tom Atkins, the hero, is trying to escape, and because he's watching Halloween on the TV at this point, the kind of Halloween theme's on. So there's a little bit of action that's where he's trying to escape, where it's the Halloween 1 music that he's kind of escaping to. I quite like that because it's another throwback. And Lee, what you mentioned another?
I just want to mention before Lee mentions that he gets his mask off, and he manages to, in one throw, with his arms tethered, to throw the mask onto the CCTV camera in the room.
we see the picture from the other end, it's peering out of the mask, so that's a clear nod to Michael Myers, isn't it, from the first two films, really? Or the first
And
film where
one
he's killing his sister.
another thing I've just remembered is the publicity line for Halloween 3 was the night no one comes home, which is a bit of which was the line for the first film was I think it's the night he came home, meaning
yeah.
Myers. So the one for this one was the night no one comes home, which
So
is a reference to the plot of the story.
As soon as he frees himself, he does that perfect 80s thing where you need to escape. There happens to be an air vent in the room with loose screws. You take the air vent down, you get into the air vent, and you can crawl where you want, and that's what he does. He of course, he doesn't want to escape. He wants to find his girl, doesn't he? So he goes on a little crawl through the air vents.
The entire operation as well before finding the girl.
Oh yeah.
The vent rather conveniently leads straight to the main processing area.
Does, and in main processing area, and you can see that at this point, they're literally in another world, aren't they? The doctor, the toy maker, and all his evil minions. They are all staring in one direction, just staring in the opposite direction from the doctor escaping, and they're just busy moving lots of triggers up and down, and lots of levers and dials, and lots of flashing. When Lee said it was like a Bond film, this is the bit where it's like the Bond baddies.
Lights blinking in and out of sequence for no apparent reason. Dials
press the red button. Why? Because it's there. Press it. Yeah, and he wants to track down his girl, does he? As well, or does he start throwing the chips, or does he get the girl?
Finds Ellie before he dumps the chips. I think, but he knows exactly what to do with these chips, and that
he finds Ellie. Who's like I don't know how he's got a complete ident memory of the factory, but he managed to find Ellie in a little room. He runs back into the main bit. He goes on the gangway.
He's had 2 tours of the place.
Yeah, he goes on the gangway above it, which is almost like a theatre setup, isn't it? It's like a gangway above the main the process of it. Oh, we need to mention a really ludicrous thing. The plot. They've literally stolen a large chunk of Stonehenge, haven't they? We forgot to mention that. So basically, in the middle of the auditorium of their little setup is a big chunk of Stonehenge, because apparently Stonehenge has got magical powers, and if you take a piece of Stonehenge and put it in the back of a mask on Halloween, it makes snakes crawl out of your eyes.
Stonehenge was like part of the original Nigel Neal script, and parts of it got kind of chucked out or changed, and it's kind of become a bit of an irrelevance, really. It's they don't even explain. They can't even be bothered to explain. I always thought this was lazy in this film. They never even bothered to explain how they stole.
Oh no, he does say, doesn't he? The toy maker, he does say it was he admits it was. We had a time taking it. Like, he laughs about how difficult it was. It was so difficult we didn't really explain it. Anyway, he steals a box of silver shamrock chips, and he goes on the gangway above the control console, and he suddenly realizes if you throw these chips down, it's going to malfunction every single android in the place. Well, I don't know how he realizes it, but he throws them all down, and they fry everyone, don't they? They surround the toy maker,
because the broadcast is on the TV, isn't it? And so by throwing the mask down, he's causing the masks to react to it, and they're all kind of firing off those lasers at the.
And the toy maker benignly smiles up at him and gives him a nod, as much to say, "Well played, old chap."
Well played, Bond.
He's as well, doesn't he?
It is like a Dr. No scene, is it? It's like, well done.
Basically Moonraker.
Well done, Mr. Bond. And then he gets fried, doesn't he, by like a giant laser which comes out of Stonehenge, and it fries him to bits, and he just he's gone. And you think it's over, but of course it's not over, because we know that the advert's still going to broadcast at 9, and it cuts to loads of children all over America.
And also, don't forget, Ellie is an android and attacks Dan as well.
Yeah, spoiler. Well, this spoilers all over this, but yeah, Ellie is an android, and now we talked about this. Like, she's an android who tries to attack him, and he's forced to kill her. But we talked about whether she was always an android or whether she became one when processed. Did he know she was an android? And he just liked sleeping with robots.
She's a sex robot, obviously. Yeah.
I think there's a case for it having always been a robot. I mean, when I watched it when I was younger, I always thought, oh, they changed her into a robot when they're at the factory. But maybe think about this: like the dad was there. What is the dad at the start of the film running away from? Perhaps the daughter was there too.
Yeah, she doesn't seem too concerned about her dad.
No, she's only interested in sex with old guys. She's only interested in sex with old dudes.
Because there was there's 25 years difference between the actor and the actress in the film, and it is noticeable. You know, she is like. Also, a little side note about this actress. I was read about her. She was Woody Allen's girlfriend when she was 17. He was 44 and he was 17. So it's like life imitating art in this film.
What a guy Woody Allen is, eh? Crikey. Yeah. He likes him. He likes him, doesn't he?
Well, anyway, so after he kills her, you know, we thought there was a bit of a bond. He tries to show a bit of emotion about what he's just done, but there's not much. And then he suddenly realizes the advert's got to play. He's got to warn everyone. And there's a bit of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers moment, isn't there? Where he's running around wide-eyed shouting what's going to happen, and nobody believes him. You know, like, take the mask off. He tries calling home, doesn't he? Because his own children have got shamrock masks. It's like, take the mask off. Don't watch it.
Change the channel. Change the channel.
He manages to get it. He manages to get some people to convince him to. Oh no, because he destroyed the radio signal, didn't he?
I think he managed to switch like 2 or 3 stations off, but it's still running. It's still
the
running
third
on
channel, he calls it, and he says that he shouts, "Stop the third channel! Stop the third!" So when he kept on saying that, I kept on thinking of ITV. That's a British reference if you're American listening to this. So yeah, stop the third channel, and they're like,
turn off Grenada,
turn off Northwest.
And at this point where he's saying, "Stop it! You gotta turn it off! Stop it! Stop it!" In the background, of course, you can hear that.
And it is no more days for Halloween, and we know that what happens because we saw with that the American Family earlier. We know the disaster that's just about to unfold and all across America. Because it's supposed to have been a bumpy year for selling masks as well, and it's. I mean, going back, you know, like the big sell which Cal mentioned earlier is that there is major flaws, isn't there? There's about 4 or 5 film ideas where they kind of.
It's completely underwritten. It seems as though lots of things were added, lots of things were taken out. I don't think it was finished. If you look at the release years. Halloween 2 was released in 1981, and the same time, a year later, 1982, Halloween 3 came out. So I don't think that the film was. It seems to me that it's kind of a not quite finished script, really. Perhaps they wanted to release.
It also killed the idea of doing these spin-offs, didn't it? Because the idea was it was supposed to be a spin-off world outside of the Halloween, the main Michael Myers stories, and.
It made $14 million. Yeah, it was the budget was $2.5 million, so it still made a profit. But I would imagine most of that was people showing up expecting to see Michael. But there we go.
And funnily enough, there wasn't another Halloween film after this for 6 years, which I think is certainly one of the longest gaps in the original series.
And they had to call it Return of Michael Myers, didn't they? They had to make it clear, you know. It's
exactly.
Come on, guys, he's in.
We promise. I can remember the wave of disappointment as a kid watching it, and at first, but then in thinking back and those creepy moments, like with the kid with the mask on and the advert, and I completely forgotten because I've not watched the film for years. I completely forgotten the whole storyline about Stonehenge and the whole storyline about killer robots.
Maybe that's the difference between us because I never saw this as a kid, so there's absolutely no nostalgia for me with this. So maybe you need that to like this too.
I think possibly, because it is one of those. It's like, as long as I've known Carl a long time, that whenever Halloween's coming out, I've hummed that song to Carl or said that word, the Silver Shamrock song, and it's
instead of a reboot, they should do like a Halloween 3 reboot, which is like I don't know, Halloween.
Should we get John?
Halloween 7?
John Travolta back. These masks are poppycock.
At the end of the film, where he's trying to get the stations turned off, he phones him and says, I want you to turn the stations off. I can't talk long. I got to poo.
But I mean, if we compare, because the idea tonight is that it's comparing the two. They are worlds apart in the sense of like one's got a lot more to say. I do admit that The Living Dead's got more to say. Stylistically, they're very different as well, aren't they? But I suppose the loose connection is the horror banner, and then also the fact is that there is a great soundtrack in both films.
Yeah, both soundtracks are regularly reissued on vinyl every few years.
They both look good as well.
They're both big
They
sellers.
don't, because they're both old films, and they both still look decent. Compared to some shockers I've seen recently, and they still.
Halloween 3 in particular is filmed in Panavision, which is proper kind of really widescreen.
Yeah.
It really looks good if you can see the whole frame on like a DVD.
They both
or
had people involved who actually knew their stuff in that sense. But as I say, like it's very raggedy. Halloween 3 is, it's lots of rewrites and lots of mess going on, but it's fun.
Early on as well, we talked openly about the leading men in these films. And in some ways, they're quite similar because they're both quite kind of unpalatable in some ways now. Chauvinistic, rude, womanizer. There's certainly not traits that you'd equate with, heroes from.
More so Halloween 3 than Living Dead, because at least George in Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue is, he's a bit rude, but that's as far as it gets. Whereas this guy is a complete sleaze bag, isn't he? He literally goes from woman to and it's hinted, not even hinted, it's completely suggested that it's the idea, this 80s ideal that all the women want him as well. Like there's a nurse, there's a doctor who spends the whole film looking at the parts of the android who got killed outside. She spends the whole film just tapping these mechanical parts and trying to get her head around why there's no body parts, it's just like robot parts. And
Isn't there a part of the film though where she kind of gets a bit confused and says something like, "Oh, I think there's been a mix-up at the lab," or something like that, wrong samples.
She finally clocks it, doesn't she? And then she dies really brutally.
She gets drilled in the head, doesn't she? Yeah, a bit of DIY from the android. I don't know. Halloween 3 just doesn't feel like a proper. I think it maybe is like a 45-minute episode of a TV show. It might have worked, but it just doesn't feel like a proper film for me. I mean,
like a Twilight Zone episode or something like that.
An episode of Twilight Zone. But
I think if they've spent a bit of time developing, I mean, the character, the main doctor, Dr. Chalice, is so flat, and there's not much to him. He's very two-dimensional, is it? There's no side to him. We don't even get like introduced to like he's got an ex-wife or any of that. Even like most 80s films, like ex-wife and
scene at the beginning, isn't there, where he go to visit his children?
Oh, there is that, yeah. So he has got the ex-wife, and he has got the gambling habit and the drinking. Yeah.
What do you think, guys? Do you think this one is staying in the morgue? What do you, Carl? What's your verdict?
I love this film so much, even though it's completely and utterly flawed. Photography, the music's great in it. It has got some genuine chills in this film, and it's just nicely weird.
Yeah,
weird enough for to be entertaining for. Again, I think this is about 90 odd minutes, which is just about long enough. So for me, I'm going to send this one off on the helicopter to freedom.
Yeah, for me.
For me, I'm personally going to send it off into the helicopter to freedom, but the helicopter gets bazookaed down by an android at the last minute.
And by default, in a pile of ashes.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to say the film's in the morgue, but then Dr. Chalice finds a zombie Chalice finds an air vent, and just like in the film, he knows how to navigate his way out, and then he's free. But he may have a bite in his calf. So it's not looking good for him.
Don't think of any young girls on the escape who might turn out to be work robots.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm glad this is like a Halloween special for us. This one, is it? Because we've not done this on our podcast. Special. But no, it'll be edited. But I could say that I could say if these are our first horror films. We've not started too bad because there's some truly shocking horror films out there, but these two are not a bad place to start.
No, that's true, and of course we needed to pay tribute to our kind of namesake and the inspiration for our kind of name.
Yeah.
So happy to do that one for Halloween. It's nice to revisit Halloween 3 again, even though watching it with a more critical eye, I think, there's certainly things that they hadn't quite got finished or hadn't worked out fully.
So if you want to be spooked and confused and perhaps maybe poop your pants, you couldn't go too far wrong with watching maybe Living Dead for actually more the fear, and Halloween 3 for just the bizarro, surreal but entertaining film that it is.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you for listening to this one. I appreciate it's been a long one, but it's a Halloween special. So what can you do? It's that's what it's all about, isn't it?
What are you going to do if you're on lockdown, everyone? You've got a couple of hours spare.
Exactly. You've got nothing else going on, so come on.
Nothing else happening. Just listen. Just listen. You'll be rewarded. Or is this a special broadcast? This could be a trick on the podcast.
Yeah, when you're listening to this, if snakes start crawling out of your ears, then then we know we've got you.
So this is Carl, Rob, and Lee, and we'll say bye-bye from Manchester Morgue Podcast, and thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
And bye-bye.
Perhaps we'll see you next Halloween or sooner.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll probably go back to some action fodder next time. Okay. See you then. Bye bye.
Don't have nightmares, guys.